another thing to touch on, cover the unit economics, the competition side, and then of course there's the cultural side of things, which is Canadians are generally more risk averse than Americans.
Factual.
And, Americans, it's built into them. You've got the American dream, big, bold bets. They took on Britain. Like, it's just in them. it's like, it's in them from the very start.
Yeah.
And Canadians more so value stability.
Yes.
Incrementalism. In some aspects, that has been helpful. You look at 2007, 2008, Canada was less impacted by the global financial crash, and even to the extent of 2001, the dot-com crash, less impacted, and less Canadians own stock than Americans do as well, right? We are a more risk averse culture, and that lends to big oligopolistic organizations. So I think there's both that structural and cultural sort of behaviors that have led to the environment that we have.
Yeah.
And as well that you mentioned, like the venture capitalism, even the behaviors of venture capitalism in Canada, the environment is just, there's far less VC money in Canada.
I mean, venture capitalists in Canada typically want an unfair advantage, and they want to hit on 1 out of 3.
Yeah.
In the US, the idealism around venture capital is you're hitting on 1 out of 10 if you're really good, and like more likely 1 out of 100, but it's just an outsized return on the 1 out of 100. And the 1 out of 100 is a 10,000x return to offset some of the loss. It's a different mindset. My question that I would ask you, Chris, around that, which I think you're nailing quite well, is do we need to change? Because there is an argument to be had that, hey, like we talk about the US booming. I mean, look at the GDP numbers right now, right? Like the US up over 20% in GDP per capita, which is effectively a measure of productivity of the entire economy over the last 10 years. Canada, disparaging stats, somewhere between negative 1.5% to maybe 0.5% gain over a 10-year period. So inflation's going up in every way. Your dollar is effectively, worth less. House prices have certainly risen, right? Like we're feeling it. We're feeling it at the grocery store. We're feeling it everywhere. But we're not producing more as a society. So maybe I'm framing that too much. But my question is, like, will that playbook of protectionism and stability versus the US playbook of boom and bust, if you will, can we keep playing this game?
I think that's a great question. And, it's certainly a global question. It's not just Canada that is experiencing that problem, right? It's Britain, it's Australia, it's other countries that have, I think, similar values that are also going through this problem. It is a global problem for the most part. And many countries are sitting there thinking, like, how do we recreate the success of all of these unicorn companies, all of these tech giants?
I think tech is important, not to jump in and cut you off there, but if you look at the returns of the S&P 500, it's driven by a handful of technology companies.
Magnificent Seven.
Exactly. If you look at the GDP growth in the United States, like it's driven by not too many technology companies that are pushing the ball forward. That cannot be said. I mean, outside of Shopify.
Shopify, and then it's like the banks that basically are the largest companies in Canada, whereas the largest companies in the US are their tech or their chip producers.
Yep.
I mean, Tesla's an auto manufacturer, but also very much in many ways a technology company. And so, do we need to change was the question. I think very much so. I mean, we can't have another 10 years. You think of like, we basically lost a decade.
Yeah.
The farther we fall behind, where is talent going to go? Is talent going to stay here, or are they going to go to places that are growing and that are innovating? Where is money going to go? Right. And so obviously there's change that needs to be made. And I think it does come down to a lot to the culture of the country and what it is that we value, because you can value stability to an almost detrimental level, which is, I think, what is happening. And when you talk about like risk mitigation, sometimes there is a appropriate amount of risk. And I always use this example of a grocery store, right? A grocery store can have zero theft. They can lose $0 to theft if they hire 2 security guards that stand at the entrance and the exit, and they pat every single person in and out of the entryways. There's no way for a store to lose money on theft. Is that the appropriate amount of theft or loss for that business? Probably not, right? There's some level of theft that is just acceptable and for the whole better, right? And so I think the problem is there's such an aversion to risk that it's become detrimental, and it's slowed everything down. Like our slowness to implement things like open banking, our slowness to implement things like, employment verification through the CRA, like just like very basic things that have been proven in other countries.
Digital signatures.
Like it took COVID for anyone to accept digital signatures in the banking world, which is crazy. And so you almost need like pandemic level events to drive any form of regulatory or behavioral changes in the country. And there just needs to be a greater acceptance and a greater tolerance to risk and a greater comfortability around failure and allowing businesses to fail. We as a society value social security so much, right?
Yes.
And again, from the last podcast, you and I talked a lot about philosophy. Friedrich Nietzsche has a quote, which is sympathy for all results in tyranny for thee. At some point, you are going to stifle the innovation, the creativity, the productivity of a country if you are so worried about saving absolutely everyone.